But most importantly, we're nearly back to what we're really talking about, which is Paul. And you're going, no, you're not talking about Paul, you're talking about Saul. But actually, so a little bit of context. There was this guy called Saul who went around killing Christians for fun, because that's what he thought was really important to do, because he thought they were wrong. So he would go around and would kill them and persecute them. And then he's wandering down the road, and it's Saul who sees this great light on the road to Damascus. And boys, can I just say, you were reading some really just complicated names there. That's really hard, so well done. I was sitting there thinking, man, I shouldn't have chosen this passage. And I felt slightly guilty, so well done. But I'm probably going to I won't call him Saul, I'll call him Paul, because most of his life we know him as Paul. Because he changed his name from Saul to Paul after he became a Christian. And but the great thing is that he stayed to be a troublemaker. He was a troublemaker for Christians before, but he just became a troublemaker for Jesus afterwards. And when I was younger, my mum had a friend at church, and her son was also called Paul, and she used to comment on the fact that they could never tell either of us what to do because we just do the opposite. I think there's something spiritual in there, that we just naturally gravitate to the Apostle Paul, who just wouldn't keep quiet and would go out and tell people about Jesus. And it was all because he had this amazing encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus. Now, I don't know what you're thinking, but if you imagine you're going on a journey, if you're on your go-kart later and you suddenly see a bright light, it's not a good sign. Either because you've just crashed and you've got little stars going around in your head, or you're in your go-kart and someone's crashed in front of you and it's blown up. Can I just say that actually it's not normally that dangerous. It would sound a lot more exciting. And go-karting is great fun, isn't it? Go-karting is great fun. But actually, you don't want to see a bright light when you're on a journey. When you're driving down the road, there's nothing worse than really dazzly headlights in your eyes as you're going down, because you can't see where you're going, because it disrupts what you're doing. And that's exactly what happened on the road to Damascus. Saul was going down there, and there's this bright light, and he's a good Jewish disciple, as someone who would have been trying to serve God faithfully. He probably was thinking, this is a bit like Ezekiel. He had this amazing vision. It would have been something he probably would have meditated on. And so he sees this thing, and then suddenly he said, who is it? And he goes, it's Jesus. And Saul has had this encounter with Jesus, who's going, all this time you've been attacking me. I don't know what it's like, those of you at school, but when there's someone who's a bully in school, can you imagine if you're always being attacked? If someone was a bully and they were always attacking someone, suddenly you get this amazing vision in his voice and going, hey, it's me. That would be quite a scary moment, because it's the person, Saul was attacking Jesus' people. But he has this encounter with Jesus that completely changed him. Because the thing is, when we encounter Jesus, we've got to be changed. So Abby, who was baptised on the 28th or whatever it was of December, she had an encounter with God, and she said, I can't not change because I've met with Jesus. So I want to choose to follow him. And Paul does that. But actually, it's going to be quite hard for Paul, because he's been attacking all the Christians. So who's going to want to talk to him? No Christians don't want to talk to him, because he's dangerous. So there's this other guy who also has an encounter with God called Ananias. And he's there, and so God tells him, go down to this place. It's like a sat-nav. He tells you it's down on Straight Street, which I have no idea where it is. But it was the closest he had to Google Maps at that point. And he says, go down there. And Ananias is like, hold on a minute. He's been killing people. This is really dangerous. And he had a decision to make, because God was speaking to him, and he could either just go, I ignore it, or I've got to do something about it. And you might go, it's really weird, the thought of God speaking to you. But actually, there'll be a whole load of us who more than happily testify the fact that we've heard God speak, and when we've obeyed that, then God uses it powerfully. And Ananias knew he had to go and do what God said. And so he went, and he encountered Paul. And when he went to pray with Paul, suddenly Paul, who'd been blinded by the light, scales fell off his eyes and he could see again. And this is a miracle that would have been another part of Saul's transformation into Paul. But it took real courage to do something. And there have been moments in my life where God's told me to do stuff, and I'm going, God, that sounds really quite silly. It sounds quite ridiculous, and everyone's going to think I'm off my head. And I remember, in fact, the very first time that God was calling me into ministry, I was training to teach, and I was like, how do I tell my parents that all this money they're spending for me to go to university to train to teach, that I'm not going to use it? And so I decided the best is not to tell them. And then suddenly my dad is there one day, like parents are prone to do, very proud of, this is my son and he's doing this and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, and my plan was by the age of 35, I'd be a head teacher. That was my outside age for doing that, which was attainable in primary school as a bloke. And so he's like, he wants to be a head teacher. And I'm like, actually, I don't, Dad. And I'm thinking, oh no, it's a secret in life. If you've got to tell your parents something awkward, do it in front of someone else, because it's hard for them to react as badly. That is your tip for life, boys. So actually I was thinking, he was like, oh no, that sounds about right. It was like, oh, phew. But actually, when God tells us stuff, sometimes there's risk, isn't there? And actually, if we're going to stand up for Jesus, it takes risk to do that. But Ananias chose to do it. And both of them were men who were becoming more like Jesus. And we talk about that as it's slightly more complicated. But learning and becoming more like Jesus is what we call discipleship. And discipleship is taught, it's caught, and it's bought. In terms, it's caught when we see other people. And I don't know who you hang around, but when you hang around other people, you catch something off them. And actually, you want to hang around people that you catch a bit of Jesus of. Because when they like Jesus and you become more than like them, it's amazing. I was at a conference a couple of years ago in Youth of Christ, and I was sitting next to this guy, and he was one of these guys, I'm not saying he's a sort of big name speaker, but I'm just sitting there thinking, there was something so about Jesus about him. He just radiated Jesus. It was like if you sat next to him, you're going to absorb some of it. He radiated so much of Jesus. And that's the people we want to hang around with, those people who just draw us closer to Jesus. And then it's not just caught, it's also taught, in terms of when we get the opportunity to hear about Jesus and be taught about Jesus by someone else's, whether it be in a Bible study, in church, in Boys Brigade, wherever it is, when someone's teaching us about Jesus, we're taught about Jesus, and it can draw us into more like it. And actually part of that is when we read the Bible. And what I'm going to say is actually, boys, if there's anyone in the Boys Brigade, I'll leave this with you, Jill, who hasn't got a Bible, if you haven't got a Bible, do you know what? This thing's amazing. Especially if you close it with a bookmark, and I haven't just done that. But this thing's amazing. These Bibles are amazing because they've got a whole load of stories in there, some of which are quite amazing. If you want a really great story, you just think the Bible's a bit boring, read a bit about the fat kid who gets a sword stuck up right into his belly. There's always a good story for you boys. And ask if you can have a sermon on that. And thanks, James. You'll appreciate that later. But actually, there's amazing stuff in here. And it's not, you just think it's really old and dull, but it's not. And if you guys haven't got a Bible at home, can you speak to Jill, and I'm going to get you one of these, okay? A special spotty one. Because we think it's amazing. And it makes a difference. And when we're taught by this, we become more like Jesus. And finally, you go bought. You can't buy becoming like Jesus. But actually, we buy it by what we do, by the decisions we make. Not in terms of, you can't become a Christian by doing good things. You don't earn God's favour by doing good things. But when we follow Jesus and when we buy it by our actions and choosing what we do, Ananias chose to do something for God, and as a result, he was drawn closer to God. He bought it through his actions. Is a way of learning. And bought is not really the term I would have chosen to use, but it works with caught and taught. So, you'll remember caught, taught, and bought a lot easier than something which doesn't rhyme. So, but actually, do we want to become like Jesus, and do we want to be changed by him? And do you know what the amazing thing is? When you look at the account there that I haven't got open now, and I won't fill through my Bible, but what happens is Saul encounters Jesus on that road. And what's the first thing he's doing? He's going out and talking to the other Jews about why Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And so they try and kill him. So he goes somewhere else. And the next thing he does is goes and tells the Jews about the way, the truth, and the life that is Jesus. So they keep moving him on because people try and kill him because he's standing up for Jesus. And actually, because what Paul knows is that when we encounter Jesus, we don't want to be held back. We can't be held back. Because when we're encountering Jesus, we want to go and tell other people about him. And actually, why would I do this for 25 years? Because I could have done other stuff. I wanted to do this. I've done this for 25 years because what is better than going and telling other people about Jesus? What is better than allowing people to encounter him in a way that changes their lives? If I had to redo my working life so far again, the only difference is I'd probably spend a little bit more time doing that in a couple of years that I didn't. Because actually Jesus is what changes us. Jesus is the person, when we encounter him, that will completely transform our life. Doesn't make it easy, doesn't make it better. But when you choose to follow Jesus, you guarantee that you will have a purpose in life that you've never known before. So what I want to do, I just want to pray and just let's just have a moment where we all just go, Jesus, I want to just focus back on you. I want to see you again. And just ask God to work in our lives. So Jesus, we thank you that as you encountered Paul, we can encounter you today. That you didn't just appear in Bible times, but you're still here. You're still appearing to people. That you're appearing to like the young people that we just talked about, and the young people that we encounter you next weekend, that we're talking about the people in this building, that as we've encountered you, you appear to us and you change us. And we just, this morning, want to say we want you to change us again. We want you to teach us more, to draw us closer to you and be changed by you. And Jesus, I just pray for anyone here who doesn't know you, who's never decided to follow you. Father, I just pray that you speak to them over the coming weeks, that they will encounter you and begin to understand who you are and what you've done. Amen.